The media fixates on the kinetic event. The missile strikes. The explosions targeting Odessa's energy infrastructure are broadcast as the front line. This is a tactical misdirection. The doctrine of asymmetric escalation is not about trading munitions. It is about targeting systemic choke points. The real vector is silent. RUSI reports confirm a systemic increase in adversary surveillance of subsea data corridors. 99% of all intercontinental data, financial transactions, military commands, economic intelligence, flows through a handful of these fiber optic cables. They are the central nervous system of the global economy. The second vector operates in orbit. The blueprint is not to destroy satellites. The kinetic cost is too high, and the debris field is a strategic liability. The protocol is simpler. Blinding. CSIS analysis confirms deployable ground-based lasers capable of dazzling orbital sensors, rendering them temporarily useless. This dual-front attack on data creates the blind Leviathan, a dominant economic and military power suddenly stripped of its senses. It possesses unparalleled force, but cannot see the target, cannot validate transactions, and cannot coordinate a response. It is a war machine without a nervous system, flailing in darkness. Severing these nodes does not simply degrade communications. It triggers a global liquidity event, a solvency crisis. This is the leverage created by a terminal national debt. The paralysis of the U.S. regarding Iran is not indecision. It is the recognition that any move risks a counterattack on this fragile, silent vector. The motive is not conquest, it is survival. The kinetic cost of symmetric, peer-to-peer warfare has exceeded the solvency of modern state actors. To initiate such a conflict is to guarantee a national bankruptcy. This is the terminal liability that forces a strategic pivot. CSIS analysis confirms that Russia's primary constraint is not military hardware, but domestic liability. The operational budget for a prolonged, unpopular war creates a solvency crisis internally. The state must choose between funding the war abroad or maintaining stability at home. It cannot do both. This weakness forces a new protocol, turning crisis into opportunity. When you cannot afford to defeat an opponent's military, you are forced to bypass it. The objective shifts from kinetic destruction to systemic paralysis. You target the economic choke points that make a military functional in the first place. The attack on Odessa's energy infrastructure is the blueprint in action. It is not an act of attrition. It is a low-cost, high-leverage strike designed to trigger a cascade failure. The goal is to cripple the economic capacity and political will of the target system, a live fire test of asymmetric escalation. This doctrine is why the U.S. holds fire on Iran. The administration understands that America's own national debt makes its financial system the largest, most fragile target on the planet. Any symmetric military action invites an asymmetric counterattack on its systemic center of gravity, a risk the math shows it cannot afford to take. The Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, provides the core calculation. A state-of-the-art main battle tank has a unit cost of approximately $5 million. The FPV drone that can achieve a mission, kill against it, can cost as little as $500. This is not a 10-to-1 or 100-to-1 cost asymmetry. It is a 10,000-to-1 cost asymmetry. The math has rendered kinetic parity obsolete. This economic inversion is termed the democratization of violence. The capacity to project lethal, strategic force is no longer the exclusive domain of states with trillion-dollar defense budgets. It has been decentralized. The barrier to entry for inflicting systemic damage has collapsed to the price of consumer electronics. This is the operating system for a new era of conflict. This is how the protocol of asymmetric escalation is executed. An adversary no longer needs to build a rival fleet. They need only identify a critical, unguarded node, like the Odessa energy infrastructure, and apply the most cost-effective vector. The objective is not to win a battle, it is to trigger a cascade failure in the opponent's over-leveraged financial system. The economics of lethality now dictate the terms of a potential solvency crisis. The doctrine of asymmetric escalation is not deployed blind. It requires testing grounds, what intelligence analysts at CSIS term proxy laboratories. These are not random flashpoints of chaos. They are carefully selected gray zones where systemic attack vectors can be refined with plausible deniability. The objective is to rehearse the collapse of critical infrastructure before deploying the finalized protocol against the primary target. Consider the persistent warnings from agencies like RUSI regarding grid fragility in Western allied but internally fractured nations. This is not a humanitarian concern. It is a strategic one. These regions serve as live fire ranges. The attack on Odessa's energy infrastructure was the graduation exercise for this model. It proved that a regional kinetic event could be calibrated to generate a systemic, non-linear economic shockwave, turning a local crisis into an opportunity for strategic leverage, as noted in chemical industry analyses of market disruption. This staging is the direct reason for the strategic paralysis observed in Washington. The hesitancy to engage Iran is not rooted in military calculus. It is rooted in the certainty that any kinetic action will trigger a pre-planned, asymmetric counterattack on a systemic choke point. The terminal national debt, as documented by economists, ensures the U.S. financial system lacks the resilience to absorb such a shock. The gray zones are where the blueprints for this solvency crisis are being perfected. The launch on warning doctrine is the logic that governs nuclear annihilation. It is not a choice, it is a protocol. The system dictates that you launch your missiles the moment you detect an incoming enemy strike, before your own weapons are destroyed in their silos. It is a mathematical response to a zero-sum threat. But the vector for that threat is no longer exclusively kinetic. The fog of digital war is the weaponization of this protocol. An adversary does not need missile parity. They need only to blind your early warning systems. CSIS reports confirm that a sophisticated cyber attack can spoof incoming missile signatures, or, more effectively, create a total information blackout. The radar goes dark. The satellites report no signal. In that moment, the commander is systemically trapped. Is the blindness a technical malfunction, or is it the prelude to a decapitation strike? The protocol offers no room for ambiguity. The risk of inaction, total annihilation, is calculated to be infinitely greater than the risk of a retaliatory launch based on a false positive. The fear of being disarmed forces the commander's hand. This is the ultimate asymmetric leverage. An adversary understands that a nation crippled by terminal debt, as documented by economists, cannot sustain a conventional conflict. This forces a reliance on a nuclear deterrent whose command and control is now a digital liability. The attacks on energy infrastructure, such as the one in Odessa, are not rehearsals for a ground war. They are live fire tests for inducing systemic paralysis at critical choke points. The digital attack on the nuclear trigger is the endpoint of that doctrine. Calibration forecast. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a localized, attribution impossible blackout targeting the digital and power infrastructure of a key U.S. petrochemical hub, such as the Port of Houston. This is not a kinetic strike. It is a calibration shot. Modeled on the low-cost, high-impact Odessa grid attacks, the objective is to test the systemic brittleness of the chemical supply chain, a known crisis vector, and measure the resulting market shock. The adversary will collect precise data on the U.S. response timeline and the financial cascade. It is a mathematical pre-calculation for a future, decisive strike on the nation's solvency.